She sat in the last row, alone, unnoticed, and silent until the whole world stood for her. The university auditorium shimmered with light, alive with chatter and perfume, and the clicking rhythm of two new shoes on polished floors. Families filled the seats in clusters, proud, radiant, eager, their laughter echoing beneath vaulted ceilings as they clutched folded programs like sacred scrolls. Up front, camera flashes danced like fireflies, capturing faces beaming with possibility. There were hugs too tight and cheers too loud, suits that hadn't been worn since weddings, dresses still creased from dry cleaning bags. Everything felt grand. But far from the aisle, tucked near an emergency exit no one used, sat a woman no one remembered seeing enter. Her navy dress was simple, the kind worn more for meaning than for style. Its seams were gently frayed, its color faded where time had rubbed against memory. Her shoes, once black, had been carefully shined, but not even polish could hide the softness of worn soles. Her hands rested gently on a small purse in her lap, unmoving. She didn't clap, didn't whisper, didn't fidget. Her deep brown skin caught a faint glow from the lights above, and her hair, streaked with quiet strands of silver, was pulled back in a low, careful bun. Her posture was upright, not stiff, but resolved, like someone who had spent years holding herself together. People passed her with distracted nods, that kind of glance that lasts half a second too long, as if trying to place her, but quickly deciding she wasn't part of this. She didn't look like anyone they expected. She didn't wear the face of donors or legacy families, of club founders or board members. She didn't belong, or so they thought. But Naomi Grant wasn't there to be seen. She was there to see. In her lap, between her purse and folded hands, sat a creased graduation program. She opened it with care, as if afraid of tearing more than paper. Her eyes scanned rows of names until they landed on one. Micah Grant. Row 8, Bachelor of Arts, Political Science. Honors, cum laude. Her lips parted slightly as she read, not to speak, but as if her heart needed to whisper his name just once, privately, before the world said it aloud. Then she folded the program again and rested her hands. All around her, conversation swirled like perfume. Micah? I heard he already got a job at Devon Group. You know Emily got a full ride to Columbia, right? The Hartleys basically built that place. Third generation. We've been coming to this school since '67. The words floated around her like mist, thick and irrelevant. She didn't smile. She didn't explain who she was. She didn't lean over to mention what her son had overcome. She didn't need to. Pinned to her collar was a small gold emblem, unremarkable at first glance. Not a university pin, not a donor badge. It wasn't something people recognized, which was exactly why it mattered. It was hers. It had nothing to prove, and everything to hold. The orchestra began to tune. A rustle swept the room as people sat up straighter, adjusted shawls, set down coffee cups. Naomi stayed still. Not out of discomfort. Not even out of nerves. But because she understood something most people in that auditorium never would. This wasn't just about a degree. This was about survival. Grit. Grace in silence. The kind of triumph that begins long before any stage. As the procession began, applause rolled forward in waves. Names were called, proud families leaned forward, and row by row, students took the stage. But near the back, Naomi didn't move. Her hands never left her lap. Two women seated nearby stole glances her way. Is she a mother here too? One whispered. Maybe her child is on a scholarship. Diversity admit, probably. One of those stories. They chuckled under their breath. Naomi didn't flinch. Not outwardly. But the line of her jaw tensed. The corner of her mouth flickered for just a second, not with shame, not with anger, but something much older. Something buried deep. Something that had been growing, patiently, for years. Because Naomi had heard it before. In boardrooms. In break rooms. In whispered comments and polite exclusions. She had heard it on buses, in banks, in the way some people looked through her instead of at her. But none of that mattered right now. Because her son's name hadn't been called yet. But it would. And when it was, something in this room would shift forever. Before the applause, before the whispers, before the world even knew his name, Naomi had already carried her son through fire. Not in headlines or ceremonies, but in silence. In mop water and aching feet. Flashback. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Naomi moved down the hallway, one slow step at a time. The industrial mop slid across the floor in practiced motions. Left, rinse, right. Again. The smell of bleach clung to her skin like a second shadow. Her back ached, but she never stopped. She had work to finish before the next class began. She was invisible here. She was used to it. The same classroom she scrubbed at night were the ones Micah sat in by day. She knew their layouts better than he did, every scuff on the floor, every flickering bulb. And when she finished her shift, she changed into soft green scrubs in the break room bathroom and caught the early bus across town. As a home nurse, she cared for strangers with kindness they sometimes didn't return. She checked pulses, changed linens, administered pills. Smiled when she had nothing left to give. She came home long after the sun went down and often found a single plate of rice and beans, still warm from the microwave, with a note that simply read, "Mom, read pages 5 to 12 if you can. I highlighted the questions." And she always did. Even when her eyes stung with fatigue. Even when her hands trembled from lifting bodies all day. She read every word of his essays, pen in hand, asking questions in the margins like a teacher no one saw. Micah never doubted her. Not once. And that faith shaped him into something rare. He didn't talk much in class. He didn't boast. He didn't chase approval. He just worked, harder, quieter, better. Micah was the only black student in his honors cohort. Some professors admired him but didn't say so aloud. Others wondered, how did he get in? Was it luck? A program? Did he really fit here? One once muttered under his breath, "He's bright, but this place needs a certain polish." Micah didn't respond. He just submitted the top paper in the class the next week. He always dressed neat, always pressed. One student smirked at his plain sneakers and whispered, "Government issue kicks." Another nudged during a project presentation and asked, "So, are you here on a sports scholarship?" Micah smiled faintly and aced the presentation. The others stumbled. At donor brunches and family mixes, no one ever asked about his mother. She wasn't there, not because she didn't care, but because she was cleaning hallways or feeding an elderly man who couldn't remember her name. Naomi didn't wear pearls. She didn't have time for parent mixes. And no one ever offered her an invitation anyway. But her fingerprints were on every one of Micah's successes. He didn't rise despite her, he rose because of her. She taught him how to show up, not for applause, but for purpose. And he learned. He became the quiet engine behind campus change. In the library, Micah explained theories others couldn't grasp, never condescending, never seeking praise. He led community drives, coats in the winter, laptops in spring. In anonymous campus editorials, someone began writing truth plainly. If inclusion is your headline, then ask who's still missing from the photograph. Faculty whispered. Some admired. A few finally listened. One offered quiet mentorship. Micah accepted, not for clout, but because he knew the path he walked was never meant for one. Still, Naomi missed his first campus award. Missed the Honor Society induction. Missed the night a professor stood up at a lecture and called Micah the moral compass of our department. Not because she forgot. Because someone had to keep the lights on. On buses, on foot, in hospital corridors, she carried his future like it was her own. Micah never once resented her absence. Because it was never absence. It was sacrifice in motion. And now, in the auditorium, her name wasn't in the program. Her photo wouldn't be on the university website. But something was building. Micah's name still hadn't been called. And when it was, the moment wouldn't belong to him alone. It would belong to the woman in the navy dress. The one in the back row. The one they had all forgotten to see. The final names approached. The orchestra softened into a low hum, the kind that signaled the ceremony's closing act. Faculty adjusted robes and shuffled papers, ready to move through the final roll call. A few graduates shifted in their seats, eager to toss caps, to hug family, to take that one photo that would live on fridges for years. But in the back row, Naomi didn't move. She still hadn't clapped for anyone. Still hadn't smiled. Not because she wasn't proud, but because she was waiting. For his name. For their moment. On the stage, the university president stepped to the podium. His voice rang clear, practiced, measured. "Before we proceed with the awarding of degrees," he said, "would like to make a small, special change to the program. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. Heads tilted. Brows furrowed. Naomi's hands tightened over her purse. "We are honored to invite one of our graduating students to offer a few words," he continued. "This student has exemplified leadership, scholarship, and service. His name is not listed here, but you'll know him soon enough." Then came the words that shifted the room. "Please welcome, Micah Grant." The effect was immediate. Gasps moved through the auditorium like a low wave. Cameras flew up. Programs rustled. Naomi blinked, her fingers frozen in place. Her son's name had just struck the air like thunder, and suddenly, all eyes began to search. Micah rose from the line of seated graduates and walked slowly toward the stage. His black gown moved softly with each step. His honor sash shimmered under the lights, subtle, but unmistakable. When he reached the podium, he didn't adjust the mic, didn't clear his throat. Just looked out, calm and steady. Then, with a voice clear and sure, he spoke. "Today, I graduate with honors. But the person who carried me here is not on this stage." A pause. A breath. A stillness. "She's sitting in the very last row." Like clockwork, the entire room turned. Cameras swung. Heads craned. And then, all at once, the light finally found her. There sat Naomi. Still. Quiet. Her mouth parted slightly, unsure if she should breathe or hold it all in. "She raised me alone," Micah said. "She worked nights while I studied. She believed in me when no one else did. She made me feel I belonged here, even when people asked how I got in." The silence in the auditorium was thick now, not awkward, not empty. Sacred. Micah's voice didn't waver. There was no performance in it. Only truth. "She scrubbed the floors of this very university while I sat in classrooms upstairs." Gasps again. Audible. Genuine. One girl lowered her phone. A boy blinked hard and looked down at his own polished shoes. Someone near the front pressed a hand to their chest. Still, Naomi didn't move. "She read my essays on 2 hours of sleep," Micah continued. "She showed me how to show up with grace, even when the world offered none." His voice carried not just across the room, but into it, into every life that had ever been overlooked, into every seat that sat behind the spotlight. And then came the words that would live longer than the speech. "I know this university will hand me a diploma today, but if you're clapping for me, you're clapping for her." He stepped back. No grand bow. No raised fist. Just a nod, to her. For one long moment, no one moved. Then a girl in the front row stood. Quietly. Respectfully. Her gaze fixed on the back. Then a boy. Then 3 more. Then a row. Then 2. And like a rising tide, the entire graduating class rose to their feet. Tassels swayed. Gowns rippled. Professors stood slowly. Some bowed their heads. Others pressed hands over hearts. Families, stunned, followed. It was no longer a graduation. It was a reckoning. A reverence. A rising. But in the very back row, Naomi remained seated. Still holding her purse. Still silent. Until her hands began to tremble. And slowly, like someone learning how to feel visible for the first time, she brought one hand to her mouth. Not to hide. But because emotion had found its way through her armor. She was seen. Not politely. Not by accident. But fully. And then she saw him. Micah was no longer on the stage. He was walking, past rows of standing graduates, past the velvet rope, past applause and reverent silence. Toward her. He didn't wave. Didn't smile for the cameras. He just walked, the same way he always had, with quiet purpose. When he reached her row, he knelt. Not for show. Not for drama. But because he understood that something sacred had just taken place. And then he whispered, so soft, only she could hear. "We did it, Mom." And for the first time that morning, Naomi closed her eyes and exhaled. The moment didn't end when the last name was called. It began there. By nightfall, a local journalist posted a story titled, "The Woman in the Back Row." It featured a grainy photo of Micah kneeling beside Naomi, her face caught mid-expression, part awe, part grace, part something older than either. By morning, the image was everywhere. Headlines praised the speech, but the real story wasn't Micah's words. It was her presence. Her stillness. her patience, her strength that had gone unnoticed for so long, finally seen for what it truly was, sacred. People online wrote paragraphs about their own mothers, their grandmothers, their aunts, women who worked in shadows, who sacrificed joyfully and silently so someone else could walk into the light. She reminded me of my mom, one post read. She looked like the woman who raised me, wrote another. I hope the world sees more women like her before it's too late, said a third. The university called a week later. They wanted to honor Naomi, invite her to speak to incoming families, host a dinner in her name, feature her in a brochure. She politely declined. She didn't need a podium. She'd already had her moment. Quiet, true, and earned. Besides, she had laundry to fold, a neighbor's prescription to drop off, and a small plant on her kitchen counter that needed watering. Micah never pushed her into the spotlight again. He understood. He went on to law school. Graduated top of his class. Clerked for a federal judge. Turned down six-figure corporate offers to do civil rights work in underserved communities. He led panels. Mentored first-gen students. Spoke at conferences. And every time he stood behind a microphone, no matter how large the crowd, no matter how grand the room, he began the same way. My mother sat alone at my graduation. But the whole world stood for her. Because his story was never just his. It was hers, stitched into every word he spoke, every room he entered. She didn't need headlines. She didn't need applause. She didn't need the stage. Naomi Grant had already built her legacy. She had raised a man who walked with honor. She had taken a seat in the very back row and made the whole world rise. Sometimes, the greatest strength sits in silence. The most powerful love goes unspoken. And the truest legacies aren't written in history books or carved into monuments. They walk quietly among us, holding purses in their laps, sitting in the back rows. Until the world finally turns around and sees them. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire, challenge, and stay with you.